or you are going to.
Thank you, Eileen. Well, good afternoon. It's a real honor to be here in the Okanagan. As my bio said, I grew up here in a log cabin in the woods without a TV, just CBC AM radio at the end of a very long dirt road. And it's, who cares? It's the reason why is that what I want to talk with you about here is about the future of the Okanagan. And when we look at the past and the future here of this valley, we're at a very interesting, I guess you could say, to use an old word or a worn-out word, a tipping point. But the fact that this room sold out in 48 hours is a testament to something that is happening. Because when I grew up here in the Okanagan, it was a very quiet place. TEDx would not have sold out. In fact, no one would have even started it. It involved a lot of very quiet fields with the sound of sprinklers. That was the loudest sound in the valley. And on Sunday, everybody went to church. And so what we have here today is a valley full of an increasing number of very civilized, cosmopolitan individuals. And we are going to create the future of this valley. And that's what I want to challenge you today as, because if we went around this room, I think everyone would have a pretty strong opinion about the issues that when we talk about sustainability, it's already kind of maybe a bit of a retro word. However, I want to challenge some of the underpinning myths behind it that I think are actually holding us back. So the future of the Okanagan is what's at stake. Right now, many of you in this room work in the tech sector, you work in the environmental sector, you work in businesses here, and the topic today is about entrepreneurship. And I want to suggest that implicit in entrepreneurship is the concept of creation. In community design, which is my field in development, we have a saying, you cannot draw a negative. So when we end up in working sessions with communities, well, what do you want? And people say, oh, well, I don't want tall buildings. The pen is still hovered above the paper. I can't draw a non-building. And eventually you have to come around to what is it that you do want. And I think that when we do that, we start to kind of find some discomfort with some of the components of sustainability as it has been talked about. One thing to remember, we have a bit of a problem thinking about the future. And the reason why is that we've started the whole discussion around sustainability in the 1980s, dealing with some very serious problems in the world. However, if you look at the book that started it all, Our Common Future, and go through the several pages of people who were involved, you will not find a single environmentalist in the entire group, not one. You'll find a few scientists, but the big majority of people were politicians, bureaucrats, and economists. And they kept backed into the concept of sustainability by having conversations about the future and discovering that if we didn't take care of the planet, we were going to completely explode or implode our economies. However, because a lot of the discussion happened around the planet and around communities, what happened was the environmental movement, which was under full sail at the time, and the social justice movement, which is also now under full sail, essentially co-opted the whole conversation. And what's happened has been a really unfortunate polarization of the conversation we're having about our future. Now, part of it, so I'm intrigued about why, and this is one of the reasons why. When you look back, again, in the history of the Okanagan, as well as most communities, and a very conservative Judeo-Christian, and there's no individual church or person at stake here, this is a multi-millennia story about what happens to good people. This is our model. This is the best person. This is the Son of God. This is what happened to the poor guy. After doing 3 years of good, he was brutally and horrifically crucified, and everybody left. So we have a fundamental problem around what happens when we begin to think about doing the right thing. It goes even deeper than that. It goes back to the very core story that we have in our minds about what happens when you live in a great place and have a good time. Ultimately, this is what happens. It ends. It ends, and it ends in a very painful way. As Jesus is quoted saying, "You will be thrown into outer darkness, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So this is the premise that we're starting now on how do we build a great future. And what it has done is it's underpinned the entire conversation with sustainability with martyrdom. And it's because we haven't actually stopped to talk about what we're trying to achieve. So I was raised in this very intense church environment, church schools, the whole thing. And I ran into trouble as I started to become a teenager because there were all these things we weren't supposed to do. And so I was carefully trying to do the right thing because I didn't really want to go to hell. That didn't seem very good. The problem was when I asked, well, what's the option? Well, I got to, apparently if I do good, I am going to go to heaven. And when I go to heaven, I get to walk down a street paved in gold. There was no mention of basketball hoops, street hockey. There was nothing. It didn't sound to me like that actually an interesting a place. But worse was at the end of the street was a cloud and a harp, and I was going to sit on the cloud and sing the hymns that I didn't like to sing on Sunday all the time. So this didn't sound like a very good place to go. With all due respect to those of you who may be religious and to the whole world that believes in some of these things, as a child, that was a real conundrum. And I remember struggling with this. Where I want to pull it forward into the sustainability discussion was that the drama that we've been playing out is one of martyrdom. And so this has become our patron saint of sustainability. Ironically, actually, it started with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan nailed this. During the first sort of OPEC crisis and the first challenges to energy, he said very clearly, conservation, folks, conservation is easy. We all can conserve. It's very simple. You turn down your thermostat and you turn off your lights. And so it became known as the freezing in the dark principle. So conservation is very easy. We can save the world if we're prepared to freeze in the dark. Now, if you then add a sustainable food movement to it that insists that you eat twigs and leaves and a few other things to that you had to work to grow in your own garden, and a few other components of this, we find ourselves looking ahead going, this is starting to sound a lot like playing a harp on a cloud. I'm not sure that this is really where I want to go. And what we end up confronting, especially as business people and entrepreneurs, is that this model is not going to take us forward. So I asked a psychologist a while back, why? How did we get here? What happened? And he said, actually, a very interesting thing. He said it starts when we're very, very young. The way the world works, and particularly the way a busy set of parents typically works, is when you're very young, you need to earn the love of your parents. Now, you're young and narcissistic, and you can't actually function intelligently, psychologically that way. You're just a little child. But you come to learn very early on that there's are good and bad. And if you're bad, it hurts, and if things are good and you do good things, etc., then you hopefully get some rewards, or you avoid the pain. What happens at a very deep level is we get ingrained as very young children that there is a story in the world of good and bad, and that we are often bad. And that as such, as we grow up, we then create a model in our minds of the world that is good and bad, because we don't want to be bad, at least most of the time. That angel's wearing high heels, by the way, so maybe it's not always so true. The dynamic here is that we then take that out into our politics, we take that out into our communities, and we began to create stories of good and bad people, good and bad things. We load them up with moral judgment, and we start creating gaps and schisms, and we break apart the connections we have with each other. We create an us and a them, and then in order to be good, we create an us that is good and a them that is not. And what has happened in sustainability is that we've created a whole pile of demons and devils that are all not us. We see it right now in the whole discussion around oil. We all have to rely on vehicles right now, on cars. Good conversation I had with a green industrial engineer recently. She said, and just where do you think the paint for your bicycle came from? There is no them. It is all us. But this childhood drama has now driven itself forward into the conversation of the future, and it's left us with this. So we look forward to the future now, and so many of the conversations that I have in my life, in rooms with people, talking about sustainability, are sentences that essentially, implicitly, or directly start with these kinds of words. Now, I don't know how many do-gooders you know, but this is what goes on in the back of my mind. I don't think there's enough do-gooders in the world to do enough good to solve this problem if we stay on that model. And so what I'm here to suggest is that we change our thinking to something that actually starts with this kind of language. And when we think about the Okanagan, this is where I would suggest we start talking about, because this is something we can all get behind. So let's start with what you really want. Let's create a new golden age in the next 40 years in the Okanagan, so that by 2050, this valley is considered to be one of the most profoundly beautiful. We haven't destroyed it. It's still beautiful. And it's the most amazing place in the world to live. So let's start with commuting. Why don't we commute through a garden? I'm not sure how many of you actually enjoy sitting on Harvey bumper to bumper, or on Spall or on Gordon bumper to bumper in the hot sun, 90 degrees outside, smelling everyone's exhaust. Not a good thing. So let's start with trying to do something else. Let's start with healthy, light-filled buildings, not only your home, but coming into work in a place that actually makes you healthier at the end of the day than when you got there, because it actually helped you detox, it helped your soul, it fed your spirit, it made you healthier. Let's look at everything you want is nearby. If you have children, you can see them for lunch at the daycare. If you need something else, you don't actually have to travel a long ways, because it's going to be fairly nearby. When you want to get out, you can get out. And there are some fantastic parks to be able to play in nearby. When you get out, this is what you hear. You don't hear an obsessive, relentless grind of noise and big trucks and all of those things. We probably need those, but we can structure it so that our experiences of it are much more interesting. When it's lunchtime, you have your choice of some fantastic places to eat. And it's not just the places to eat, you get to eat real food, which is something that, yes. I had a talk with myself a few years ago when I was in the fast lane in my little car. It was a little car, it was a diesel, so it got good mileage, but it had no guts. So I had the pedal to the metal, literally, like right pressed as hard as it would do. I was in the left lane. I was talking on my cell phone, and I was eating a cave bar at the same time. And I realized that I had created a world for myself that had high blood pressure and no life, bad food, and I was a sustainability consultant, and that this is really not a good way to go. This is maybe more important than food, you know, man will not live by food alone, as the good book says, what you drink. And we're here in a golden age. We're the emerging golden age here of some really amazing things to drink. A conversation with the person who made the food, who made the drink, connects you in a much deeper way to the soul of what's actually there. When you do want to grow some of your own, it's a really exciting and interesting experience. And this is one of the ways that we need to integrate ourselves back deeper into the soul and nutrition of the food, is to actually engage it, because it builds respect for the people who actually bring us our food. When you're paying your taxes for the infrastructure that keeps your community going, it'd be really nice to know that that infrastructure makes the world a cleaner, healthier, happier place without a lot of really dysfunctional systems that actually hurt things and cost you a lot more money. Let's create an Okanagan without piles of garbage. In fact, let's just do away with the concept altogether. You can imagine knowing, as you look around the valley, that you have an unlimited amount of renewable, clean, carbon-neutral energy that's going to keep you and your family and your business going for a very, very long time. You can have the education you need, you can have the health care you need, or your parents need, or your kids need. That's a good place to start. You get a chance to see art every single day. You get a chance to do art, if that's what you feel like you want to do. You walk out of your office or your home and you start to kind of move because there's something going on out there. You have your choice of what you need from shopping right nearby. You have a choice of careers. You don't have to stay in just one career. You can move around. You don't have to leave your community. You actually have the ability to learn a career. You have a community that gathers around you and your children as they move into a career environment. And you know that what you buy is actually healthy. And again, you can probably actually meet some of the people who created it, and you can buy that local. And of course, you need different homes throughout the course of your life. So you do in fact have a choice of homes to live in. Now, when I think about that, it sounds like a life of martyrdom to me. This is a horrible life. And yet, everything I've just crossed through, everything we just talked about together, you and I have both read documents and heard speakers talk about, that was what we should do. We must do this. If we don't do this, the world is going to come to an end, and we will be the horrible people that the them. And it creates this really horrible atmosphere. It does not empower you to do things. It does not create an entrepreneurial energy. And that, I think, is why the base myths, and to a certain degree some of our human psychology and nature, has essentially stacked the deck against us as we move into the 21st century. And all we have to do is just change that mindset. And we're actually going to move forward to do some other much more interesting things. So you all know this from your life, and particularly those of you who are entrepreneurs. You know you create what you focus on. Even if you're fearful and you focus on those fears, for some reason they just don't seem to go away. If you focus on the other things that you need, you begin to create those, because there are doorways opening all the time that we don't notice unless we're looking for them. And so in our conversations around sustainability, we need to focus on the future not with fear, but with actually an extreme excitement of being able to create a place that you love, that you feel more at home at than you've ever felt at home in any other neighborhood in the world. This is what is going to take us to the future. The final point I want to talk about around our slight misnomer on sustainability is the marathon. And this is the story of the timing. Right now, there's a sense of panic and urgency in the sustainability discussion for businesses and developers and communities. And it's a very unfortunate one. It's true we need to start taking action very clearly, but if you look at what the scientists are saying about even something like our most urgent agenda, which is climate change, they're saying you have 40 years to achieve the target that we all need to be at. Now, if you've ever done any work on it, you'll know that means you have to start right now. But you don't have to achieve a carbon neutral economy on Wednesday. And there's absolutely no way we could anyway. And so this becomes the dynamic of people who want to run a marathon. And if they don't train very slowly and carefully and make sure their body gets acclimatized and that they learn how to eat right and they get the right equipment and the right shoes and they keep doing it, then they blow a hamstring on the second week. And then they stop altogether and never go back because it was a bad experience. And we've done this a little bit in sustainability by trying to leap out ahead too much in technology and some things. We need to be patient. We have 40 years. You can live with the vehicle you have now. The next one you buy needs to be 15% more efficient. And the one after that, 15% more efficient from that. And over the cycle of an average life of a vehicle, you're going to find that the vehicle you own in 2050 is a nearly carbon neutral vehicle. And each time, it wasn't one of these very freaky leaps. And we can do that through our buildings, we can do that through our food supply, we can do that through every aspect of the changes that we're all looking at that we know we need to do in order to change away from what we did in the 20th century to the 21st century. So as I close here, I encourage you to shift the model from a mechanical one, which is pull the lever and make a radical change immediately, to an organic one. We are actually growing the future. We are growing the future out of events like this. We are growing the future out of small decisions we make, and it takes a while for things to grow. So be patient, be optimistic, have a great vision, and that way we will collectively together create an Okanagan Valley that is going to be one of the most profoundly amazing and sustainable places to live in the entire world. Thank you.